So today we're going to talk about AutoCAD efficiency tools and best practices. Any handouts to go with this webcast? What I can do is that I generally will create a PDF of the slides. I will hand that PDF off to Lori. You can email her and get the slides, basically the slide deck. There's no handouts per se. So just a little bit about me. My name's Ryan Wunderlich. I have 37 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I'm currently one of our senior support specialists. So if you call in, if you are an IMAGINiT customer and call in for support, there's a good chance you'll get me. I have taught AutoCAD as a certified instructor. I still teach AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Revit, InfraWorks, and some of the others here out of our Boise office. I'm in the Boise office. I've had more than 15 years in CAD management. I've had 8 years in cruise ship building, 5 years support doing civil survey, landscape architecture before that, and I've pretty much run the gamut. The only thing I haven't done is aerospace and automotive engineering. Those are the only businesses or factions, industry segments I haven't really touched. And I have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So just a little bit, here is, I have a landing page on our IMAGINiT website. Lori will post that link here. That's resources.imaginit.com/author/Ryan-Wunderlich. You can go here, and what's in this landing page is everything that I produce as far as blogs, videos, anything like that. So today's agenda. First thing we're going to cover is standards. We want to keep the same look and feel between all drawings. Templates, you want to start with what you need and populate with standards. Tool palettes, build them, use them. Drafting tools, OSNAP scripts and more. Keyboard commands, know what they are and how to modify them. And custom programming and or scripts. These are all the things that can tie in to make AutoCAD more efficient for you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is standards. Now, the first two items I'm going to talk about here, standards and templates. These really are, well, standards is not necessarily AutoCAD, but standards is important in understanding that whatever you have in your standards is going to feed into those templates and things like that. So first thing is have to ask yourself some questions. Do you have standards? Do you follow standards? Are those standards documented well? Are they easy to find? And are they adaptable and kept current? I have a webinar that I've done that specifically relates to, how to be a CAD manager. And one of the things I talk about in there is that you need to have standards, but the standards need to be adaptable and they need to be able to grow. Standards are not set in stone. They need to have some ability and some wiggle room in there to adjust as you need. So things to document in your standards. These are the most common things that I find that people don't do. Layer names, colors and line types, text styles and dimension styles, whether or not they're annotative, multi-leader styles, table styles, plot styles. The big ones, folder structure and file naming convention. And then the last thing, anything that you run as far as lists, scripts, third-party programs. These are all the things that need to be documented in your standards in some way. Okay, the things that you don't document are the things that are going to cause your drawings to not look the same between two individuals. And if you don't have any standards or not sure where to start, best place to look for is NCS, which is National CAD Standards, AIA, and then any current drawings or drawing sets that exemplify the look and feel you want. Those are the best places to start if you don't have an established standard. So I'm going to give you some examples here. So I have an example of a well-documented standard. I'm going to show you two. I have a project directory structure standard and a square meter calculations process, which is an instructional standard. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is general overview of like design group directories. So we have two drives that we work off of for this company. When I did this, we have an F drive and we have a V drive. And there are other letters like G and I and N administration that appear in Explorer window, but should be ignored for most purposes. Right? Whenever you create directories or files with a date in them, you must always use the following format. Can you talk about how to minimize file link name in a large organization? Andrea or Andrea, I'm not sure which one, but I will talk about that in just a moment. Always use the following format so that we use a 4-letter year, 3-letter month, 2-letter date, as the new building standard must be followed at all times. Always use the date first and a brief description of the file and the file name. And then we go further. So for example, this is our first level details. This outlines what should be in here. And then there are 3 directories that are not part of, that don't follow our standard, which is hold number, a dash, and then the ship name in this case. Again, I did this for cruise ship design. So a lot of this stuff is based on that, but the whole process is the same no matter what you're doing. And then under subdirectories, so under each one of these ships, we have subdirectories, general admin, shipwide specific. Here's what's under general administration, right? This is what's supposed to go in the general administration. Here's the folder. Here is a description of what goes in there. Under shipwide, again, and it says right here, this area is for information relating to the entire ship that is not specific to a single venue. Right, so you have shipwide areas. Again, here is the directory name. Here is what is supposed to go in there. And then you have under specific. So for example, we have an amphitheater. Under the amphitheater, we have administration, artwork, budgets, etc. These things are to help us understand what goes into each project. This is a fairly complex one. These ships are rather large. Yours may not be nearly as big. And then I have a CAD standards drive, which outlines, here's where our CAD standards live. Here's my annotations, any applications, blocks, details, documentation, what goes on the local machine, plot styles, plotters, symbols, title blocks. And then I have a void directory. So anything that shouldn't be used is put in the void directory, but it's left over in case it needs to be used on old projects. All right. I have all of this stuff in here. This is a well-documented standard, or at least a documented standard, so that we can get to the first part. As part of that, one of the things I also did is that we actually have terms. And this is one of the things we hand out to the new people, because not everyone is familiar with what goes on any ship, whether it's a cruise ship, a cargo ship, things like that. So here are the common terms that we're going to talk about: bridge, wheelhouse, bulbous bow, bulkheads, bulkhead deck divisions, where we talk about the different type of bulkhead types. So if we're talking about an A60 bulkhead, that means it will, it's a big fire bulkhead. There's a B. Cabin is a compartment for passenger or crew. Cladding is covering of one material or another. Davit's a hoisting device for lifeboats, etc. All of these things are important to know, especially if you've never been on a cruise ship and you've just started at a company. These are important things to know. So again, this was part of our standards. This lived in our standards drive where people could go back and reference this. So now there's a procedural document here where we're going to talk about square meter calculations. So a lot of what we did was based off of square meters, and these are raw square meters, steel to steel. This is not wall to wall. So well documented in here, right? First thing you do is you make a copy of the GA you're going to work on. You put it under square meter calculations, and it actually walks through the instructions here. Change all the colors to color 7. Remove or turn off any unneeded items, existing solid hatches, blah, blah, blah. Run command BYC to make all objects color by layer. Run the fix block to change all block geometry to be layer 0, color by layer. Those are the processes. And then we run DSQM command and TSQM command, one to add the design layers, one to add the technical layers in AutoCAD. Again, these are custom programs I wrote, and we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. And then it says draw a closed polyline around the outer perimeter. And then here's how you get staterooms and balconies to come out correct. Once all the steps are completed, there's another command, get area T. Look for hatch bus. What it's going to do is it's going to zoom in and highlight any hatch that doesn't have an area, which means that you've got a bad hatch. Correct that, rerun it until it comes out clean. You insert this, right? Here's my V, blocks, square meter tables, updated development, presentation color. You insert that table, fill it out, and then this table there feeds the square meter comparison tables and charts that live in an Excel worksheet. Right, all calculations are to be rounded. And then I go through here. So my category is polylines. It goes on the 0 polyline layer. Color in CAD is number 6. And I go through here and outline, what it is. For this is galleys, crew galleys, pantries, provisioning, goes on the catering layer. And then you'll see where it says example 12. I actually can go down further in this document and you will actually see examples of, here's example 1, here's example 2, here's example 3, 4, etc., where I actually take an existing ship and I outline exactly what is expected. So again, this is what's documented in our standards. This is the standards that are followed. Now, going back to Andrea's question, can you talk about how to minimize file name lengths in a large organization? One of the things that you all need to be aware of is that Windows has a maximum limit of 255 characters. So that includes the UNC path out to a server, plus all of your directory structure, plus your file name. If you exceed that, you may double click on a drawing and it's going to open up AutoCAD and tell you drawing's not valid, or it just opens you up to a blank drawing. One of the things you have to be careful of is you want to minimize the number of steps it takes for you in a folder structure to get down to where you want. You want to keep the names as small as possible, but still functional. And that's why it's very important to document those standards on what is expected so that you don't have that problem going on. Now, some of the CAD programs and some of the other programs that you may run don't actually use the Windows limit. There's a limit in itself of either anywhere from 128, which I've seen, all the way out to about 200. So if you run into a situation like that, and I've run into this quite a bit with Adobe Acrobat, is that if the PDF with the name and everything like that is too large, it won't open in Acrobat till you copy it somewhere else that has a shorter file path. That's a Windows thing. If you don't know about that, you're going to get stung by it. So I like to tell people up front, 255 is the maximum characters. All right. Any questions on documented standards? I know that seems really remedial for probably quite a few of you, but it's important to understand that if you don't have documented standards, you're going to have great inefficiencies doing any project, because you're going to have to, if Bob works on a drawing and he gets it the way he wants it, and then Bob isn't able to work on that project and you hand it off to somebody else, that person may not know what Bob's standards are and may spend a lot of time trying to get it to a point where he can work on it, where if you have a common set of standards, it makes it a lot easier. Now, the first place, once you've got your standards in place, the next thing we do is we talk about our templates. Okay. The template should be the DWG or DWT. DWG is AutoCAD drawing, DWT is AutoCAD drawing template. You should start all project drawings with. Depending on what you deliver or what disciplines you have, you may need multiple templates. And Lori, if you don't see Steve, Valine would like to get a copy of the slide deck. So make sure we put your email address in there so that we can send that to him as soon as we're done. You may need multiple templates. So if you are a multifaceted organization, let's say you do MEP work and you do mechanical and plumbing and electrical, you're going to need a template for each one of those disciplines. Okay. The drawing or the template should always include the items, all of the items mentioned in the standards, or all of the items you are going to need from the standards that are critical. And other items to consider adding to your template: scales, title blocks, and any other items you need to produce quality output. Okay, your drawing template, or where you start things, is going to be so critical for the next steps down the line to make sure that you have people who don't need to constantly go back to a reference document, figuring out what layer they need to create, what needs to go on it. Okay. Now, templates, start with the out-of-the-box template and add content. Save it as a DWT and give it an appropriate name. And for those of you that live near the border or deal with both imperial, i.e. feet and inches, and metric, millimeters, centimeters, or meters, you will need to have a template for each. You can't use the same template for both. Okay, the end goal is to have very little setup or thought process to begin the design. This will also help minimize mistakes and incorrect standards. So this will help make sure that you have the same quality of drawings when you print and things like that. And if you have a good golden submittal set of drawings, use that as your basis to start. Okay, now a couple of examples of starting templates. So in my AutoCAD here, I'm going to go File, I'm going to go New, and I'm going to come here to my webinar, and I have an ACAD.dwt, and I have a venue comparison booklet. So I'm going to open up the venue comparison booklet to start. When I open up this drawing, right, it opens up into model space, and model space is essentially blank. You'll see that I have a couple of layers in here pre-populated. And if I go to my plot 11 by 17, this is where I have done all the setup in here. So what you're going to see in here is that I have my reference ship names, I have all of my borders set up, I have everything set up exactly how I want, and I also have this information over here. So this gives me square meters in berth, square meters double occupancy, square meters in seats, depending on which type of venue you're using, you would use this. And then I have our typical leader on how we want these things called out. And we do all of this information in paper space. And then when we go to print these, so I'm just going to move these over in here so you can see. Now when I go to print this, it's using a venue comparison CTB. I already have my page set up for 11 by 17 PDF. I don't need to think about anything. All I need to do is click print and hit OK, and it's going to print this. And if I preview it, you'll see exactly what we get. So my area space name, that even though it's gray in paper space, actually prints as white. These all print as black, and there's a certain line weight associated to them. That's why the plot standards are important, so that I get the same look and feel. Okay, that's one template. The other template that I have in here is just a basic ACAD.dwt. But what I did in this template is that I have this pre-set up just a little bit. I have some text styles already pre-populated in here, L100, L120, L140, because we didn't want to use annotative text in this template, so it's all non-annotative. Okay. We also have our standard dimension style, and our standard dimension style set up with a slightly different standard for 1/4 inch equals a foot scaling with architectural units. You'll also see that in my layers, I have a bunch of layers in here that are supposed to be used for what we're doing. Again, now I don't have to think about anything. I can just get in here and go. If I go to my layout, I don't have any title blocks in here. What I usually like to do in my templates is set up layouts that have the individual title blocks that are going to be pre-populated, things like that. What I'm trying to do is minimize the amount of work the typical user is going to have to do in order to produce quality drawings, or at least get to work. Right now in here, I can switch to whatever layer I need. I can start drafting, and I don't need to go in and add my layer. I already have dimension styles. I already have text styles. So none of those things need to be set up on the fly. They're already in my template. Now I know everyone's like, well, we kind of do that. Well, that's important. That's one of the things that's going to help drive your design process and make sure that it is as efficient as possible. So those are some examples of your starting templates. Now we're going to talk about tool palettes. How many of you actually use tool palettes today? And if you're not using them, that's fine. I just want to show you that tool palettes can be useful for a great many things. You can place blocks, commands, several items, and other things onto palettes to speed up the drawing process. Typically, I separate mine into working groups where I have commands all on a command palette. I have a blocks per discipline or function. So I will have an electrical. If I'm dealing with electrical, there will be an electrical tab with the electrical blocks. There'll be a mechanical tab with mechanical blocks, etc. And also anything else that seems to hide or take longer to find. If you're in AutoCAD and it takes you more than 3 seconds to figure out, well, I think it was under manage and I think it was somewhere, nope, it's not there. Is it under, nope. How many of us do this? Go, I know I've seen that. Now I just got to go back and find it in the ribbon. Can't seem to find it easily. That's one of the great things. Stick it on a ribbon. Now it's going to be quick and easy for you to find. Right? Because we all do that. And as a bonus, if you have a drawing with all of your standard blocks in it, you can use Design Center to create a palette with all of them in one shot. What I mean by that is, right, quick demonstration. So if I have, and again, I'm just going to turn on my palette so I can go to view, and I should be able to turn on my palettes up here. I typically just, tool palettes right here. So here's my tool palettes, right? And these are the out of the box ones. I haven't created a new one. You just come here, right mouse click, and I can say I want to make right mouse click here, make a new palette, right? I can give it whatever name I want. Example. And then if I have a drawing, right, we go ahead and we can customize the palette so we can make different palette groups. We can move stuff over this way. Now I have a problem getting my palettes to show and to get them attached on the screen where I want them. Robert, we can talk about that, but that's one of the things that we do want to be cognizant of is how we do that. So if I remember right, we come in here and we are going to, right? No, what did I do? Oh, that's right. Have to go to Design Center. And it's going to take a second for it to generate all of this. Right, so if I have a drawing in here, and I think I stuck one in my webinar, right? I did not stick it in here. But I can create any of these. So for example, this profiles and corridor drawing that I have, if I want to utilize this, I can come in here to blocks. And you'll see if I come into this drawing, I can say create tool palette. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through and create a tool palette with the blocks that are in the drawing this way. And I got to wait for it to complete. There. Come on. It takes a second. There's a lot of blocks in here. I may get to this later. Any way to get a text dump of styles rather than using GUI accessed by one guy? CAD guy retired, no documentation. Kind of, Darvin. We're going to talk more about that a little later. What you're going to have to use or what you're going to have to go find is you're going to find that there are Lisp routines and things like that out there in the web that you can use, that you can get a dump of things like that. I have a Lisp routine where I can dump all of my layers and their properties into an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, and I can actually show you that. So you might have to go through and do a little web searching to find one. If you're not familiar with Lisp programming language, it's going to be best to find something that works or is pretty close to what you want and use that. Otherwise, you're going to have to learn Lisp programming on the fly. Can you copy and paste from Layer Manager to Excel? Nope, you cannot. I shouldn't have done this drawing. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do this my way then. Right, we all make mistakes. I grabbed the wrong drawing, or I grabbed the drawing I didn't really intend to grab. There's my, oh, hang on just a second. Where's my task manager hiding? There we go, more details. We'll come in here, details. Yep, and end task on that. I grabbed the wrong drawing. I shouldn't have grabbed that one. The drawing that I grabbed accidentally has like 300 or 400. You can copy paste from Layer Manager to Excel. Okay, can you use Lisp programming in AutoCAD LT? You cannot. All right. Why can't I? Come on. Wow, I have locked my system up good. Hang on, where is it hiding? I think I have a dialog box. There it is. Perfect. Now we'll go back into AutoCAD here. Okay, if you can copy paste from the layer manager to Excel, that probably means you're using a layer palette. The layer dialog palette, you probably can do that. I have not tried that. I have found that it doesn't necessarily give me results where I want. So let's get back in here. Right, let's go back in here. And then we're gonna go back and reopen the drawing that I had initially. There we go, where is it? Can you create a palette from a folder of block drawings? Yes, yes, you can. So how you do that, we can actually go through that process. So let's go Control 3, right? I should have a test palette in here, right? My test palette's gone. We'll create a new palette, right? Here's our new palette. What you end up doing is you end up coming in here using Windows Explorer, and you can just grab this information here, click, drag onto the palette, done. So everything that's in this directory. All right. Do you use the tool sets available in AutoCAD 2022? Which tool sets are you specifically referring to? Are you referring to like the mechanical tool set architecture, things like that? Can you create a tool palette from a folder of block drawings? You can. I just showed you that. Before we get too deep into tool palettes, I did a broadcast a couple of years ago on tool palettes. I'm going to end up redoing that broadcast, and we are going to have all about tool palettes, and I believe that's going to be in July. I believe that's what we discussed, Lori. June. It's either June or July. I'm going to do an entire webcast on just tool palettes. That's where we're going to talk about saving a palette created by one person for use in everyone else, and some of the things that you can do. So I can come in here, I can modify properties, and I can always have this referenced. Right, this is where it's coming from. I can always tell it to prompt for rotation. I can tell it to use current color layer. I can actually force this to a individual layer from the tool palette. So every time I insert this, it'll always go on the 0P line layer, and it will create that layer if it doesn't exist. Those are the things that we're going to talk about in that as well. Real briefly, what we do is we go into customize palettes, right? We have that new palette right here. You right mouse click and you export that palette. You open up AutoCAD on the user's machine. You go into the same area. You right mouse click and import, and it will import that palette across. The other thing we can talk about is a centralized palette location and what needs to happen there. All of that's going to be covered by that. Okay, that's how we export tool palettes for use by other users. And again, I will cover this, and like I said, I believe this is going to be a June webinar because we're going to do April. June. So in June, I'm going to do a webinar all about tool palettes. So if you guys want to learn a little more about tool palettes, it's going to be all about tool palettes then. Okay, and obviously, if you guys are using the block palette, right, you can actually map to the same location. So here's that same general folder. I have a tool palette for here, and I also have that same general folder showing up right here. So here's my dirt, and I can see the same block here. There's dirt. There's my door, and then down here is, right, there's door, etc. You can use either or. This is the block palette where we have the libraries tab, and we told it to point to that same folder. So again, efficiency comes to knowing where your standards live, and if you have you can either create a full palette of your blocks, or you can use the block palette here. and with libraries, and point to those individual folders and make those blocks available that way. All right. Now we're going to talk about some of the drafting tools we have. So how many of you use running O snaps? Right? How many of you use the O snap overrides where you shift right mouse button to bring up your O snap overrides? One of the things that I commonly run into, yeah, there are people who love them, there are people who hate them. I use running O snaps, but I keep my running O snaps down to a minimum. And then I use the O snap overrides for the things that I need. The thing that causes me the most trouble is when somebody has nearest and or has all of their running O snaps turned on, because you never know what you're getting. And then you've got your standard grips and multifunction grips, whether or not you run with dynamic input on or off, and puller tracking, useful if you only draft specific angles. So these are some of the drafting tools that we're going to talk about. Do you use the standards checker and layer translator functions in the manage ribbon? Yes, I do, Robert. And we actually did that webinar last November, December. If you go to my authors page or you go to the webinars page, you can actually go back and review that, where I cover the CAD standards checker and the layer translator. And drafters that use nearest running O snap aren't drafters for long. Yeah, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, and everyone has their own preferences. And I don't really care. It's AutoCAD is really great because it's about what you want it to do. It's not what everyone says. So just so you guys know, my typical O snaps are endpoint, center, node, intersection, and insertion. That's typically all I ever run. Right. So if I draw a line, right, and if I click on this line, here's your basic grips. This is your stretch or lengthen grip. This is a multifunction grip. This is just simply move. This is just a basic grip. And then this is here, stretch and lengthen. If we draw a polyline from here to here, right, now we have a multifunction grip in the middle where I can stretch it, add a vertex, or convert this to an arc. And again, I have stretch, add a vertex, remove a vertex. So anytime you have a dialog that pops up on a grip, that's a multifunction grip, so you can do more. Let's see, do you recommend storing blocks in the template or in a tool palette or block palette via library? That's a lot of that is going to depend, Brock, on how many blocks we're talking about and if they're common for everyone. I generally don't put in blocks into a drawing and then erase them, because if someone goes in and purges before they've done anything, they remove all those. I'm usually a big fan of having them either in a tool palette or using block palette. That's typically what I recommend. If you right mouse click, you can do modifiers, right? Right mouse click, right? These are my modifiers here. If I'm on one of these, this is just standard right click. Right, so these are my multifunction grips. I love these. I don't do a whole lot of trim, extend, any of those anymore because I just primarily use grips. I find it to be a lot easier. Right, there's times when you need precision. Again, if I'm drawing a line from here, I can use my shift button, right mouse click, and these are my overrides, so I can say perpendicular here. That way I'm not constantly running with the perpendicular O snap. Is there a way to change the shift right click and default N O snap from none to nearest? That is going to be making changes in your CUI. There is a way to do it. You have to go in and you have to modify the CUI and you have to put the emphasis on the N. You have to change that from none to nearest. So when you do this shift right mouse click, you're going to see, right, N defaults to non. There's a way to do that, but it requires modifying your AutoCAD CUI, and then it's only modified for you. Right, so those are grips, multifunction grips, running O snaps. Let's see, what was the other ones I talked about? right? Dynamic input on or off and puller tracking. Right, so let's go back in here. So puller tracking is down here. Here's your ortho mode. So we'll talk about those real quick. Right, here's your line. I can draw a line anywhere. If I turn ortho, it locks me, that's dynamic input. It locks me to 0, 90, 180, 270. If I turn on puller snap, I can actually tell it that I want to change what. So this I'm going every 45 degrees. Here I'm going every 60, 75, 85. And this drawing here is apparently, this is a surveyor drawing, or this is a setup in surveyor units. So if I come over here, we're going to use this drawing instead. If I go into my puller snap here, you're going to see that I can snap at every 45 degree angle. So you'll see that I get the little tracking show up at 0. As soon as I hit 45, it should pop open at 45, 90, 135, 180. Again, if these are great, the difference between ortho and puller angles, or the puller tracking, is that the puller still allows you to go wherever you want. It just gives you the indication when you've hit one of those specific angles. Ortho is all or nothing. It's either 0, 90, 180, or 270. Snap ang can be used useful on a temporary basis. You are correct. Snap angle just changes the angle of your crosshairs. The only problem I have with it is that if you don't remember to turn it off, it can cause problems for other people who get into your drawings. If they don't know if they don't understand why the crosshairs are rotated and they freak out. Do profiles save snap grip settings? No, those are not profile specific. Your snap grip settings are actually drawing specific variables. Right, so here we have auto snap. Where is it? It's in here somewhere. Here's your OSnap, right? Snap base, snap angle. These are all drawing specific. Snap grid, that's a registry. Snap mode is drawing whether or not snap is on or off. Updating all items on pallets to point to a different path after moving them. Again, Harold, I will cover that in the tool pallets one. There's two ways to do it. Either you have to go in and individually do it, or you can actually open up the tool palette as a notepad document and do a find and replace on the paths. I find that's usually the easiest one, right? Your snap units, again, this is saved in the drawing. So that's a drawing specific variable, so it only applies to the drawing you're in. Hopefully that gives you some information, Gustavo. And then last thing is dynamic input. Right, I turn on dynamic input. If you don't see dynamic input here, you come to the 3 bars for customization. Make sure you have a check mark here for dynamic input. So now when I draw a line, it's going to give me, right, I can type in a length of 59,000 and I can tab and I can say I want that to be a 45 degree angle, things like that. Dynamic input is great for some things, depending on the age of your machine, and if you're struggling with a drawing that is a little more difficult to work in, has a lot of geometry or a lot of things going on, you may find that turning off dynamic input improves performance. I generally run with it off. The only reason why is that if I have dynamic input on and I just want to type in 0, 0, 0 for a base point, it assumes that wherever my crosshairs are is 0, 0, 0. So there's a little nebulousness to that, but you can find that you can draft things a lot faster if you're doing basic drafting with dynamic input on, because now you can have a visual cue as to where you're going. So again, I can draw a line, I can type in a specific length here and then tab for a specific angle. Whereas if I turn it off, now I can go in the direction I want and type in the value and hit enter and it'll get there, but it doesn't matter where I'm at. Can you add snap mode to a custom list file that you run on file load through app load? You can add a snap mode command or a snap mode variable change to a custom list file that you run on file load. You can absolutely do something like that, so you can change it. Yeah, you can do that. All right, so those are some of the drafting tools to help you out. And then we're going to talk about keyboard commands. Right, if you use the keyboard, knowing these is very useful. They're actually stored in what's called a PGP file that can be edited for your needs. Yes, a recorded video of this will be available for future reference, and that usually gets posted up on our website, usually within a couple of hours or a couple of days of this. So probably be sometime early next week. So I'm old school CAD, right? This is what I typically change whenever I get into a new version of AutoCAD. I typically change R from redraw to rotate. There's no sense in having redraw anymore. But R for rotate was what it was years ago. I changed D from dim style to distance. That's what it was years ago. I changed C from circle to copy, and I set CI as circle, again, old school. I changed the letter P from pan to be plot because, again, I use a wheel mouse. There's no sense in needing the pan command. I changed LA from layer to classic layer because I prefer the old style dialog box. Again, that's personal preference. I changed the I alias from insert, which opens up the block palette, to the classic insert, which brings up the old style insert. I have reasons behind that. And then to do Q, I add Q to do Q save and add QQ to do quick select. Right, I'm a heavy keyboard user in AutoCAD. These are the things that I change. So here's how to edit this file in AutoCAD or even AutoCAD LT. First thing you do is you turn on the old style menu bar, set that to 1, click on tools, navigate to customize and edit, and select the edit program parameters. That's your PGP file. I will open the PGP file in Notepad and you can directly edit from there. If you use this method, you will need to close and reopen AutoCAD to put the changes into effect. If you have Express tools, you can launch the command alias edit and do the same. This will reload the PGP when done and you don't need to close and reopen. Right, some things to keep in mind: it only supports single command, so you can't set it to do a zoom extents. Nice try, because that was the first thing I tried to do years ago, was set zoom extents, because we use that exclusively. Right, context and spacing is important when editing, so this is what it actually looks like. And I generally recommend adding to the section at the bottom. That way, if you make a mistake, you can go back and fix it. So anything I put down at the bottom under where it says user defined command aliases, no, you do not require admin rights to make these changes. This PGP file lives within your Windows profile and should be fully editable by you, even as a restricted user. I understand, Stephen, you can double click the wheel mouse to do a zoom extents, but some people who are still heavy keyboard typists don't do that. So I generally recommend you put them down here, because it reads this file, this PGP file, from the top to the bottom. So whatever the ones are last at the bottom are the ones that it uses, overriding anything that was above it. Right, and a quick demonstration. So again, I have tools up here. I can go to my customize, program parameters. It will bring up my AutoCAD PGP file right here. Right, it will show it was last edited 9/24/2021. And you'll see these are my commands down at the bottom. All right, I always do FF and ACAD.list, but it fails. It is typed correct. All others work: MM, move, SS, stretch, etc. That's going to be an issue on how you're doing FF and what you're trying to launch with it. you may have the syntax incorrect. You can use a gaming mouse and programs command. I have express use and use alias edit. How do I share the new aliases with other CAD users? Brock, you're going to have to copy your PGP file and give it to someone else and have them put on there. You can do the re-init on command line, click PGP file update, and then you don't have to close the drawing. It can save you a few seconds. I generally don't do that because it doesn't always work depending on where it thinks the PGP is from. Yep, so what you see here, so let's go up here. Here's the command, right? So here is, all the way up here, P is for pan. And then all the way down here, my P is set to plot. And if I do P, it launches my plot dialog. So again, whatever is at the bottom of this here under user-defined command aliases takes precedence over what's up on top. If you change C to copy, do you need to provide a new keyboard input for circle? I generally recommend doing something for circle because up in here, you'll find that C is defined as circle, but C is not defined anywhere else. That's why I always define CI for circle, because that's what it was for me for many years. And I believe it was the 2005, no, I think it was 2005, 6, 7, or 8, somewhere in there, that Autodesk changed the PGP to be different from what it's been for years. John, he copied all the others and just changed it. 2018 it works, 2019, 2020, 2021, 22 fails the same ACAD.LSP. That we're going to have to take offline. There's something probably in the coding that's incorrect that needs to be addressed. Okay, so those are all the things that we can do to change. And under Express Tools, it's command aliases here, brings up this dialog box. Right, and I can add, remove, and edit. So I can add the alias, QQ, because it's not in here yet. I can put in it's Q select. Okay, have it there. We hit yes. That does the re-init. Now QQ brings up my Q select box. Wow, we're just motoring right along, and I've got about 10 minutes left. So let me get through the rest of this. Last thing is custom programming and/or scripts. So custom programming or script files can help with repetitive tasks or things that would take normally a large amount of time. Custom programming can typically be done with Lisp, VBA, or .NET. I highly recommend either using Lisp or .NET. VBA requires an additional add-on where you have to install the VBA enabler for AutoCAD. If you have old holdover VBA, now is the time to either port it up to .NET or see if you can do it with Lisp. But it still works today. You can still do it today. The nice thing is scripts are by far the easiest way to get custom programming to do something. Plus, this is the important thing, is AutoCAD LT will also run scripts. So AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT will run scripts. AutoCAD LT will not run Lisp or .NET or VBA. We're actually going to cover this in a February webinar on February 17th for AutoCAD quick scripting and spreadsheets. Okay, so just kind of a quick demonstration of some of the things I have. And this is going to go back to right where I said, is there a way to transfer all of your settings that you've set to another CAD, like when you update to a new version? If you have your 2021 set up exactly how you want it and you want somebody else to have that exact same one, come into here, export your AutoCAD settings with AutoCAD closed. It's going to create a zip file. That zip file is going to have all of your information. Go to their machine, hit import, and it's going to overwrite their settings with yours. That's probably the easiest way. If you're moving versions, that's where it becomes a little more problematic. And if you're going from AutoCAD to, let's say, AutoCAD Architecture, or AutoCAD to AutoCAD Mechanical, you can't do it that way. So going back to the PDF that I talked about with that square meter standards, right? You can tell that this has none of the correct colors. So with some quick Lisp routines and some things that I've done, I can type in DSQM. Now it's my design colors. I can type TSQM. That will update all of my gray stuff to be correct. And then this is where I can do some of the other things. For example, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to do a select similar and erase all that. So as part of that document, we need to label all of these. So it's FFSQM, and it labels all of this. Daniel, you're using Civil 3D 2021, do not have the import export settings option. That is correct. However, if you go to my, hang on just a second, I can answer this question for you, and I'll actually post this. There is a way to do it in Civil 3D, but you have to manually create them, right? There's a way to create the import and export of the settings for Map 3D and Civil 3D. It's right there. So if you do not have the import and export settings, you will not have that in Map 3D or Civil 3D. You can create those icons and those shortcuts. So what I did here in a couple of quick steps is that I've labeled every hatch pattern with my text standard. It's an M text, it's a field, right? So if I actually go in here, you can see that it's a field, and I'm going to turn off quick properties because that's going to just drive me crazy, right? You'll see that this is actually a field that's associated to the area of the hatch. So with just some quick Lisp, I created some stuff that does some very quick and easy things, right? When we have other things, you know, again, this is just Lisp. It's a stock standard, pretty easy stuff. I've got some other things, like I got a command fix block, goes through and sets everything to color 0, color by layer for the block, so it overrode all of my block definitions that had colors, set everything back to 0. There's a lot of ways you can do this, and as part of that, one of the things that I do is that in my tables here, I have fields. These fields are using Lisp variables that are created from a Lisp command. All right, so I'm going to run get area T, right? And then if I regen all, right? So we're going to see that all of these things are the same. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be a different layer. So instead of that, let's change that to the restrooms deck, right? And we're going to see these numbers update. All right, get area T, regen all, and you'll see that number updated and this number updated. Okay, and I did all of this with Lisp. So I can label all of my hatches. I can use those hatches to generate areas, populate tables, things like that. It took me some time to do the programming. Simple command combinations using defund C. We're actually, Frank, we're starting to run out of time, but more or less what you're doing or what you're referring to. Let me go in here. All right, I have a bunch of these Lisp routines. Let's go. Right, so here's where I'm loading this. This is where I'm doing all of my defund. So I go defund : CCL space open parenthesis, close parentheses, and then runs a command. Defund CCN runs ncopy. Defund COL runs copied layer. Defund CS runs change space. Combine zoom and extents. That one is, where do I have that? I might have that one set as Z's. I used to have that one in here where it does zoom extents, and I may have gotten rid of it because I don't use it anymore. Yeah, you would essentially have command zoom inside quotes, a space, another set of quotes that would say E for extents, and parenthesis. Sheet sets. Zach, I have not forgotten you on sheet sets. I actually did a full sheet set webinar already. That's going to be a best place to go. And if you go to my videos page, I can guide you right there. Right. Do you have that one, Lori?
I have all of the links in the chat that we're looking for. I can try to find it while you're speaking.
Okay. Actually, I just found it. It's this one. That's the one that has a link to all of my webinars, and in there you will find, Zach, there is one that's all about sheet sets. You'll also see the previous ones that I've done, all about XREFs, what's new in AutoCAD 2022, what's new in 2021. Yep, there's a field and sheet sets in AutoCAD near the bottom where I cover all about what is fields and get into sheet sets. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for attending. And, you know, as Lori would say, you know, be well, be safe, and we'll see you lately, or we'll see you again.